George Floyd Act? What happened to it? How come it isn't being discussed after they failed to pass it into law? And what about qualified immunity, which would hold officers directly accountable? Why are they trying to switch accountability from the officer who murders from having to pay in a wrongful death lawsuit to police departments and municipalities? Doesn't that let the guilty officer off the hook? In case you missed it, compromises are being made on qualified immunity, claiming it's the only way to get it passed. And if passed, using the compromises that are being offered, the accountability which was fought for will be made null and void. Because the officers that murdered unarmed individuals will still pay no costs for the crime committed, because the burden will be placed on the police departments and municipalities. They will pay any compensation that is owed in a wrongful death lawsuit, not the officer who murdered. The objective was to remove qualified immunity, not shift it. But that's what's being discussed under the guise of doing away with it. As it is now, the states pay the civil lawsuits that are awarded and settled in a wrongful death lawsuit, because the guilty officer is protected underneath the doctrine of qualified immunity. The George Floyd Act attempted to remove qualified immunity, making the officer directly responsible in a civil lawsuit. The state would no longer pay these wrongful death settlements on their behalf. The officer himself would pay because he could now be sued. But the act failed to pass, and compromises are being made to succeed in its passage. And what's being proposed now will shift the payments from the states to the police departments who hired them or the municipalities underneath their work, eliminating accountability for the police who committed the murder. And while police departments should bear some form of penalty for keeping and retaining police who have murdered unnecessarily, when do we get to the part where police themselves are punished? Because under the measures currently being proposed, there is no accountability for police and no compelling reason for any officer to end the brutalizations and murders. There's nothing that promises charges, no penalty or compensation that he'll pay, and no loss of employment either. For all the money that the states have been paying in these wrongful death lawsuits, not one bit of it has caused an officer to lose his job. So they were perfectly happy to pay thousands, even millions, for lives they've wrongfully taken. And the attorneys in these cases were more than happy to simply settle it instead of proceeding to court for a full trial. So settlements are offered instead of going to trial. And when those settlements are accepted, it comes with a condition of no admission of guilt on the part of the accused officer. It simply says, you say he's guilty, we say he's not. Here's some money for the loss of your loved one. Nothing in this determines guilt. And because of it, no legal basis exists for the departments to fire them. Even though they've murdered, even though they've paid out $1 million settlement, they get to keep their jobs, even after millions have been paid for their wrongful taking of life. The truth is, if these department heads wanted them to be fired, they would be fired, whether or not they admitted the wrongful taking of a life, because there are umpteen violations that occur throughout the taking of that life. And when a wrongful death results, you have grounds to remove that officer. Whether he admits to wrongfully taking the life or not, his actions resulted in a wrongful death that should not be excused, apologized for, and smoothed over as a terrible tragedy no one but the bereaved family must bear. But this is how the departments are operating, while politicians attempt to shift who shall pay the families in their wrongful death lawsuits. The end result of this compromise still leaves the officer immune from penalty or punishment for for the wrongful taking of lives. So where in all this is qualified immunity being removed? I am fully persuaded that nothing of real substance can be achieved by measures which lack accountability for police who murder unarmed innocent people. Every fighting demand out for justice out there in the street has been a demand to arrest, charge, and convict the guilty. The act created in the name of George Floyd does none of that. Shifting who pays in a wrongful death suit does not erase qualified immunity. It erases the accountability which was demanded for police who murder. How is it they've confused holding an officer accountable with a payment plan on who pays for the murders he's committed? Because that's all it is a change in who pays, excluding the guilty themselves. Please tell me that as a politician, you understand the difference between a payment plan and accountability. Because if you don't, we're in deeper trouble than we think.